Back in 2014, Samson Williams got some advice from a coworker that would change the trajectory of his life.
He was like, Samson, here's 3 things to improve your life. Get on LinkedIn, wear better socks, and buy some Bitcoin. So I got on LinkedIn, bought myself some Hello Kitty socks, and bought some Bitcoin in 2014.
And it was that last thing, buying $200 worth of Bitcoin, that sent Samson down a rabbit hole. A few years later, by 2017, he saw hundreds of other new cryptocurrencies being created. He saw the world's first Bitcoin billionaire get minted, and it felt like it was becoming a mainstream thing. Samson became a true believer in the coming cryptocurrency revolution. Samson is black, by the way, and he says one thing he was particularly excited about was this growing idea in some parts of the crypto community that crypto could be a driver for racial equity.
We're going to change the world here.
That was a few years ago, and since then, Samson's view of crypto has changed a lot. And that was even before the massive crypto crash this year.
Retail investors, particularly in black and brown communities, they've been sold the sizzle, but there ain't no steak there. And we're the first group who loses out.
This is The Indicator from Planet Money. I'm Adrian Ma. We've been digging into crypto this past week, and today we're going to focus on black investors. In a recent survey by Ariel Investments and Charles Schwab, 25% of black investors reported owning crypto, compared with just 15% of white investors. And other surveys tell a similar story. So today on the show, what's driving that adoption? And what does the current crash mean for this idea that crypto could be a building block for black wealth and help close the country's long-standing racial wealth gap? When Terry Bradford saw the surveys showing black consumers embracing crypto way more than white consumers, she was a little surprised.
It didn't intuitively make sense to me that was actually happening. And I was like, no way, that can't, that can't be true.
Terry studies payments systems at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. She says part of the reason she was surprised is that black consumers are a lot less likely than their white counterparts to invest in the stock market or retirement funds. For a lot of reasons, which all lead back to systemic racism, African Americans in general have less wealth to invest.
Whether it's income, home ownership, home equity, investments, black consumers are almost always at the very bottom of all of those measurements.
Terry wondered why an outsized proportion of black consumers seem to be drawn to this relatively new, relatively risky digital asset. In her research, a few themes emerged. For one thing, she says, a lot of black consumers are distrustful of traditional financial institutions. And you don't have to look too hard into history to find examples of why. She said, take, for example, the Freedman's Savings Bank. Congress chartered the Freedman's Bank in 1865 after the Civil War. Tens of thousands of formerly enslaved people deposited their money there, but those in charge of the bank were white.
The folks that were responsible for running the bank got into some pretty risky, perhaps shady transactions, and in the end, basically lost all of that money.
The bank collapsed. Many depositors lost all their savings. And Terry says this is just one early example of how financial institutions have failed or mistreated or discriminated against black consumers.
Gratitude to Deborah Bryan. Black mommies are important. Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Wednesday, October 1, 2025. So I have been told. Our broadcast for today, man, that Gus T, for years, we've been broadcasting for 16 years, and folks have heard me say, hey, many, many times for years, we have the best intros in the business, bar none, bar none. Now, I will say, today, Gus T does not play music for no reason. Is that Diddy in the background on the day of the sentencing? Yes, Diddy in the background on the day of the sentencing. I did ask on social media, do anybody feel bad for Diddy Combs? Question. Anyway, but the main NPR report that we heard about, wow, you have a disproportionate amount of investment by black people in the States into cryptocurrencies. Now, that report was from 2022 on NPR, so it may be that old Gus T is just a lame, broke black dude who missed out on the crypto boom, because it fluctuates down, up. It's up now, so maybe I just missed out, didn't ride the wave. But I did remember that report from 2022 where they talked about a part of, they think the theory, black people investing in crypto might be that black people are a little leery of financial institutions because of the long history of racism against black people from financial institutions. And they cited the Freedman's Bank. Now, I would like to say that Gus T, hey, I'm so cool and my memory is so great that I also remember the Freedman's Bank specifically was mentioned in that report. I did not. But, hey, I did remember that report. I thought of it in connection to today and was rewarded with my diligence, and then we got cherry on top, Diddy. All of that said, I think it important for today's broadcast on the history of the Freedman's Bank. One, how did we get here? Reading is more important than watching television. Direct one-line connection. We had this spring as a guest on the program, Dr. Calvin Schermerhorn. We talked about his book, 2025 book, The Plunder of Black America, How the Racial Wealth Gap Was Made. And I said, when we spoke with him, I said, man, I was pleasantly disappointed with this book. And the reason I used that curious phrasing was because the book was new. It was about racism and economics specifically. And it was, like brand new. It was just days before he came on the program. But I found out about Dr. Schermerhorn because he wrote an article about the California wildfires. Beg pardon, the 2025 California wildfires and the economic impact on black people there. And I said, oh my goodness, that's so important. I literally was just in Southern California and was talking about all of this, so and thought that hadn't been discussed enough. So I was overjoyed to discuss all of that and thought we could just make kind of an aside to discuss his book. But wow, I was pleasantly disappointed because, man, it ended up having all this great information about the long documented history of white people deliberately plundering black people. And I mean, Luke, we're going to take every nickel. You're not going to have nothing to pass on to your offspring but debt. And it's well documented, footnoted, historian. Within all of that great information that I was surprised to get, and I did read the book. It wasn't like I said, oh man, we're not going to talk about this. I did read within our dialogue. He said, oh yeah, there's this great book that just further emphasizes the point that I'm making about this deliberate, willful plunder of black people. This book, Savings and Trust, The Rise and Betrayal of the Freedman's Bank. And I said, okay, duly noted. We'll go check that one out. That was a few months ago. Get through all the Willie. So that was before I went to Wisconsin. Go to Wisconsin. Sade C. Robinson. Come back and, oh yeah, we were supposed to read that book. Whew. I can only say one of the best books I have read this year. And it's been an awful year, hasn't it? Diddy's sentence, government shutdown, hasn't it been? There's shootings every day. Hasn't it been terrible It's been terrible. I think they got that proverb. It says if you're on a cliff and you think you might actually fall, but you see the strawberry, you should go ahead and eat the strawberry even still. Well, this is like, it's been terrible. Every day just awful. 2025, awful. Me and Diddy right there, neck and neck. I'm with you, brother Diddy. The only good thing I can say for this week, I read a book that is so good in the midst of just calamity at every moment. Like, wow, this is amazing. Might even be top 10. It is that good. I'll have to think about it, but absolutely spectacular. And this is all from a book I didn't even want to read. Not this book, the previous book, Calvin Schermerhorn's book, that I didn't even want to read. Wacky. Listeners should keep in mind the broadcast, obviously, with Calvin Schermerhorn, Emily Flitter, The White Wall. What a great title for a book. She writes finances for the New York Times. That book is all about really the same thing. Deliberate efforts by white bankers to practice racism against black people in a variety of ways. That might mean that you can't get your check cashed. That might mean that you can't get a loan. That might mean if you work at the bank, even if you are the president, we're still going to practice racism against you. Variety of ways, but The White Wall. Beryl Satter. Family property. She was a guest on the program a decade ago, 2015. She talks about in that book the economic terrorism in Chicago specifically, and the way that white people like her father owned all the property and exploited black people. They would charge them like 400% times the rent, 400 times what the rent was supposed to be to rent to colored people in Chicago. She documented all of this. In fact, she has a whole chapter where she calls it a noose around the neck of Chicago, talking and using a metaphor to lynching with regards to the renting practices of white property owners like her father is called family property, that was comparable to economic lynching, economic terrorism against black people. And we talked about that in detail. And then, or last two you should keep in mind from the book club, mention it all the time, is in the top 10 for sure. The Half Has Never Been Told, Edward Baptist, where he goes into crippling detail about how the banking financial system in this country is the Negro and white direct and or investment in slavery. Like every matter of fact, remember that book, they did the reviews where they had lots of white people who were angry. They said, oh my goodness, Edward Baptist, who is a white man, did you write a book that suggests all white people are racist and culpable in slavery? Yep. And document, like, well, it's a financial book, so it's well documented. The last one, I didn't think of this until today. I was almost done with the book, and I said, wow, have you heard of something like this before? White people just going and looting a bunch of black people who were so-called newly free. Have you heard of anything like this before? And I said, ooh, yep. We spoke with Sylvia Vollenhoven in the summer of 2013. Got that odd name. Where's she from? South Africa. What did you talk to her about? Her documentary film, Project Spear, that was banned from South African television. What was Project Spear about? Project Spear is about how white people in South Africa, just before they released Nelson Mandela, stole all this money from the South African treasury. They called it lifeboats, where they just gave all this money to white people And then they release Madiba from prison. Say, oh my God, these Negroes are unruly, and you all don't know what to do with your finances, and oh my goodness, black people, see, we told you, Negroes. That's what Project Spear was about, but they banned that film. They didn't ban it because they said she lied or that Sylvia Vollenhoven didn't do her research. They just said, we're not going to talk about this. How much money was it? Millions and millions and millions. I said, yup, I have heard this before. In fact, I told Sylvia Vollenhoven, I said, dang, they just allowed white people to steal all this money before they say, oh, well, apartheid is over. Here you go. You can have it, Madiba. And she said, there are some cynical people who said, yeah, that's about what it looks like. That would be another one, especially, I guess you have not seen that film, Project Spear, but you can go back and hear Sylvia Vollenhoven. Yes, I have heard something like this before. Anyway, our broadcast for today, one of the best books I've read in some time, just spectacular. Our guest for the broadcast, in addition to writing an amazing book, she is a scholar of African American history, specializing in the history of slavery in the United States. She received a doctorate in history from Princeton University in 2015. Woodrow Wilson is rolling over in his grave. Joining us live to discuss a phenomenal text, our guest, Professor Justene Hill Edwards. Professor Edwards, let's see. We have you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. If you can kind of keep that volume level, lots of black self-respect, we should be able to hear you fine. Thank you so much for... Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Wednesday evening with us out of your busy schedule. Anything that you would like to share in terms of a bio with our listeners? This might be their first time hearing from you. Just kind of briefly before we get to it.
Sure. I'm an associate professor of history at the University of Virginia, where I teach courses on African American history broadly, and I'm a specialist in the history of slavery and the intersection of the history of race and American capitalism.
Spectacular. You are classified as a black female, is that correct?
That is true, yes.
Right on, right. Well, just folks who haven't seen you, just making sure. I guess before we get to the serious matters, she did share she's a professor, University of Virginia. I do know something about Charlottesville, Wahoo Wah. I did see the footage. Were you out running amok on the football field when they beat the Seminoles? No. Was that you hanging from the goalpost?
No, that was not me, but I did see the celebrations on TV, and I was there in spirit, but not there in person, thank goodness.
Okay, I'm going to double-check the footage, because I seen them cutting a fool in Charlottesville. I said, oh, if Professor Hill Edwards is out there, but I'm going to double-check. Listeners, you all can check as well and see if you find anything unsavory, we'll say. Anyway, already classified as black. Wow, this book is spectacular. I guess let me start with the sign. I have not, I guess, done my diligence in paying attention because they have so many monuments and plaques in D.C. And I guess some of these plaques extend beyond D.C., so I'll have to keep my peepers open in the future. But you pick one of these monuments and it reads, on this site stood the principal office of the Freedman's Savings and Trust Company, founded on March 3rd, 1865, to receive deposits from former slaves. Frederick Douglass served as its last president. The bank was closed on June 29, 1874. The building was sold in 1882 and razed a few years later. Now that's the plaque, DC. Okay. a lot more to the story. I looked at the one that they have in Tennessee, because they have, I guess, some of these popped up where they have various branches of the bank throughout the South. So this is the one from Tennessee. It reads, in 1865, the U.S. Congress chartered the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company, known as their transition from enslavement. The Freedmen's Trust Company, known as their Freedmen's Bank, to aid freed persons in their transition from enslavement to freedom. In 1870, Samuel M. Arnell and J.P. Baird established the Columbia, Tennessee branch in a room over the McGraw Livery Stable at 6th and North Main Streets. The branch was one of 4 branches and the last one established in Tennessee. After several successful years, the freedmen deposited more than $37 million. In 1874, the Freedmen's Bank closed all of its branches due to mismanagement and the financial panic of 1873. So this is from the Tennessee plaque. So you start off the book, not this plaque specifically, the one I read first. Are these accurate plaques about the Freedmen's Bank?
Well, I start off with the plaque that's found on the Treasury Annex in Washington, D.C., which is adjacent to the White House and the Department of Treasury. I start the book there because I really want readers to understand the history that we're working with the history of the Freedmen's Bank. And so even though this plaque offers, I think, great information, I think it barely scratches the surface of a longer, more complex and more heartbreaking history of the bank, and especially of the bank's depositors.
For sure. And this book gets to so much of that history and important detail. It kind of reminded me of Harriet A. Washington's Medical Apartheid, even though she has a number of books, but in the sense she talks immediately about the resistance that she encountered to writing her book. Did you encounter any resistance to writing Savings and Trust?
Actually, no. I feel very fortunate to have chosen, I think, a compelling topic at a time where there's a thirst for wanting to know this history. If anything, I have had conversations with friends, with colleagues, with other scholars and historians who were equally as interested in this history and offering me support in writing a book that not only is intellectually rigorous, but is highly readable to a non-historian who's really interested in the topic.
Wow, fascinating. Okay. Well, okay, to piggyback on that, something that is intellectually rigorous, but you don't have to be an academic scholar to appreciate what you've compiled. Who was your audience for Savings and Trust? Was this a book you intended everybody to pick up and figure out what happened with all this, or was this you wanted your students to read? Who were you thinking was going to pick this up?
Well, it's funny. My students are actually reading a chapter of the book tonight for class tomorrow. So yes, I did want my students to read it. But I also wanted to write a book that my mother, for example, could read, or my best friends could read. I wanted a book that would resonate with the average reader who may have their own relationships with a financial institution. It might be that they have a mortgage or a car loan, perhaps a student loan, perhaps they have credit cards. And I start the book really thinking about this idea of trust. And in today's world, I mean, we all engage with financial institutions, be they a brick and mortar institution, a credit union, a large bank, or even an online financial institution. And so thinking about whether we trust these institutions with our money, with our savings, I think is such an important part of this story. And so kind of connecting readers' understandings of how they trust the financial institutions with which they choose to engage, and then thinking about the first population of freed African Americans and how they were venturing into the period of freedom in 1865, trusting white bankers with their money and what that must have felt like, especially as the bank collapsed and many of them lost their life savings.
You have so many amazing quotes from Frederick Douglass sprinkled throughout the text. One of the best of the book, because you start on one of the chapters with this. He says, despite my efforts to uphold the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company, it has fallen. It has been the black man's cow, but the white man's milk. Bad loans and bad management have been the death of it. I was ignorant of its real condition till elected as its president. Oof, man, he has lots of amazing quotes throughout the book, the great Frederick Douglass. But wow, that is what you just said. It is hard to be trusting when you are ignorant of all the actual facts of information, and that is big part of this here story. I guess after the plaque, so we get to the beginning, and one of the passages that really caught my attention early on, I mentioned Beryl Satter, and she uses the metaphor of lynching to describe the racist rental practices in Chicago, and goes into lots of detail as to why she chose that metaphor. It sounds similar when you are talking about the impetus for the Freedmen's Bank, and this is coming out of slavery right at the end of the Civil War, and black people who are, hey, let me buy my freedom, or let us get some land so we can go out and do the so-called American dream as free people and not in bondage. You're right, this is the very beginning of the text, the introduction. Savings and Trust charts the rise, expansion, and ultimately collapse of the Freedmen's Bank. It also illuminates the multifaceted violence of Reconstruction through white racial terrorism against African Americans, especially in the regions of the former slave South, is well documented. Physical violence was not the only form of terrorism that white Americans waged on free people. The bank's plunder by white bankers, financiers, and capitalists was brutal. While not the interpersonal atrocities that white vigilantes pursued against freed people, the strategic pillage of the Freedmen's Bank by white capitalists represented another type of violence against African Americans. It encompassed the ruthlessness of capitalism left unchecked. It was the financial violence of theft. That is an introduction. Wow. That's one when I think of, did you get resistance from people, anyone, editors, what have you, saying, wow, you are talking way too blunt, Professor Hill Edwards, and it sounds like you're kind of indicting all white people in this, and terrorism. What was there pushback?
No, actually. I had several conversations with my editor and even my agent, and they were encouraging me to push the boundaries, to not be timid in connecting what I was talking about in this book, what I had researched about the plunder of the Freedmen's Bank by white bankers and philanthropists, and really not being afraid to call it as it was, which is why I use the language of violence. I call the plunder of the Freedmen's Bank financial violence, especially because, historians of the period, historians of Reconstruction understand that white terrorism against African Americans, especially in the South, was ever present. It was everywhere. There was always the fear of white violence. But what is often not talked about is the ways that African Americans, especially the recently emancipated, felt financially after the Freedmen's Bank failed. And it was financial violence, which is why I use that term, which is why I use this language, because they were not only concerned about their physical safety, but they were concerned about their economic well-being as well. especially during this unstable period of freedom. And so I actually use these terms a lot in the book for this precise reason, to connect the kind of white violence of Reconstruction to the financial violence that was the plunder of the Freedmen's Bank by white bankers and philanthropists.
Context of White Supremacy. In a similar vein, you early on explained that black people were not ignorant about finances, and partly because they had watched their relatives and loved ones be used as collateral and sold when white masters defaulted on loans and such. So from a very intimate and painful perspective, they had learned quite a bit about finances by the time we got ready for this bank to be constructed. Can you elaborate or give us extra details?
Sure. Well, this goes back to the work that I did in my first book. It's called On Free Markets. I published it in 2021. And in that book, I look at South Carolina in particular, and I look at what was called the slaves economy. And so the ways that the enslaved communities in South Carolina from the colonial period up to the beginning of the Civil War, how they thought about money. And I found it just so fascinating that the enslaved were constantly thinking about money. They were constantly finding ways to make money, to earn money, to buy goods, to sell goods, to trade with anyone who would trade with them, including buying and selling goods with their own enslavers. And so the idea that African Americans entered the period of freedom beginning in 1863, 64, and 65 without ideas about the benefits of saving or the benefits of buying property was just not true. But in fact, African Americans had been cultivating and learning about finance, learning about money through the violence of slavery. In many ways, the kind of fundamental ways that they understood these ideas was through the values placed on their own bodies. They understood what it meant to go up on an auction block and have their bodies, have their lives valued. Black women, enslaved women in particular, understood the realities that their bodies were valued, their wombs were valued because they could reproduce capital for their enslavers. The children that they would bear would actually be assets to their enslavers. And so the idea that African Americans during the period of slavery entered freedom with no ideas about banking, about finance, was absolutely not true, because their entire lives had been structured, both in direct and indirect ways, by the financial values that enslavers, slave traders, investors were placing on their bodies and their lives. And you mentioned, but before we began to speak, Ed Baptist's book, The Half Has Never Been Told. He does this beautifully. Calvin Schermerhorn, in his work, does this in such a heartbreaking way. And so I'm building off of their work, too, to kind of show this longer trajectory in history.
Professor Justene Hill Edwards, brilliant research. With that as kind of a really a beautiful segue, you talked about the impetus for the Freedmen's Bank. We're done at the end of the Civil War. Union is going to crush the Confederacy, and black people, you even talk about the number of black males who pitch in, join the Union Army and fight to get paid and all this, take care of their attempted families and such. What is the impetus to create these Freedmen's Banks after the end of the Civil War, end of, I guess, formal plantation slavery in the U.S.?
Mm-hmm. Well, the idea of the Freedmen's Bank came from a Northern abolitionist, white man who lived in New Jersey with his family. His name was John Alvord, and he was a minister. He was an abolitionist, and in 1864, he was working for the Union Army, and he was traveling around with them, especially with General Sherman on his march to the sea in the summer and fall of 1864. And he took that opportunity to speak to as many African Americans as possible, and he was kind of asking them about what they wanted in this kind of new period of freedom, what their goals and hopes were, and they would tell him that they wanted, one, of course, to be reunited with their families, but two, they wanted access to land and to buy land and property. And so he had been witnessing the performance of 3 military savings banks that were established in 1864 for black soldiers. Now, it's important to note that in June of 1864, black men earned there was a specific act passed by Congress that would pay black men on par with their white counterparts for their military service. And so black men who were serving, they were having a problem not saving money, but being able to send money back to their families. And so 3 generals created 3 military savings banks, first and foremost for black men, one in Norfolk, Virginia, one in Beaufort, South Carolina, and one in New Orleans. These banks were incredibly successful at the end of their first year, such that one of the branches in Norfolk, I think, had the deposits amounting to over $50,000. And this is not adjusted for inflation. This is in real dollars. And so Alvord sees the success of these 3 military savings banks. He goes to New York at the beginning of 1865, and he gathers a group of prominent white men who were affiliated with the Republican Party, who were bankers and philanthropists and politicians, and he introduces the idea to them of supporting a savings bank for the nation's recently emancipated African Americans. He gets the support. He goes to D.C. He gets congressional approval and support. And so Lincoln signs the act to create the Freedmen's Bank on March 3rd of 1865. It would be one of the last pieces of legislation that he would sign on the last day of his first term as president. He would actually be inaugurated the next day. And so it was this very important institution that he signed to existence that would go on to serve African Americans, most of whom were recently emancipated from enslavement.
You have some just, I think, brilliant passages in the text to kind of show, one, what black people understood about finances, black people who had been kept illiterate and uneducated deliberately so that they could be kept enslaved, but also, I think, repeatedly, black people's well-earned suspicion of white people. This is, I think, a great passage. This is chapter 2, The Growing Pains, 1865 to 1866. One old man, black, raised his voice to ask how the deposits would be secured. Mollin Hewitt, I think that's how you say it. Mollin Hewitt, is that it? Mollin Hewitt?
Yes.
Okay. Mollin Hewitt was perhaps not prepared for such a direct question about the fundamentals of banking. It is even possible that he had not anticipated that he would be questioned about the bank's soundness. Imagine that. He told the man and the other congregants that the bank was composed of a large number of the best and wealthiest men in the United States, but he also disclosed that the best and wealthiest men at the bank's helm were not personally responsible for securing the bank's deposits, a fact that would prove to undermine the bank's stability in the future. Hewitt concluded his answer by saying that the congregants needed to trust the men's honor and integrity of character. The man continued to interrogate Hewitt, not satisfied with his answer. Good job, brother. Were there any old rebels and slaveholders among them? Now, I'm being revisionist. I kind of process this. Are there any racists going to be in the bank? That's how I'm thinking in my mind. But he said, sticking true to the text, were there any old rebels and slaveholders among them? Question. He inquired. His question got to the heart of black depositors' concerns about the bank's ideological foundations. Was the Freedman's Savings and Trust Company a front for scheming Confederates or avaricious former enslavers? No, Hewitt replied. They are all Northern men and your friends. They should have all run right at that moment. But I think this is such just an amazing passage. Kudos to your scholarship here. But I mean, and you talk about this was so important because these black people were lied to and duped because so many of them, they're asking correct questions. They're not just, whatever, just throw our money around, or we're going to go and shoot dice and get drunk and all that. As you said, we're trying to get land, property, bootstraps, if you will. And so many of them are thinking the government's got our back. The government's not going under. This bank is backed by the government, so we can give them our money. Things will be fine. And not to mention, black people do not have friends at the bank. Your thoughts, Professor Hill Edwards?
Yeah, and so the vignette that you just read is from chapter 2, and it takes place in early June of 1865. And it is happening at a black church named Ebenezer Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia. It's still there today. And I drop readers in kind of a moment when African Americans in Richmond are starting to construct their own religious institution, construct their own churches, and representatives from both the Freedmen's Bank and the Freedmen's Bureau kind of do a roaming tour of regions of the South. And, of course, Richmond, as the former capital of the Confederacy, is one of those places. And so the bank's representatives, Hewitt at this time, who was on the bank's executive committee, he's white, he's a banker. He comes to Richmond and is trying to convince African Americans to open accounts when a branch opens in Richmond, which happens in the fall of that year. And so he does not anticipate that members of this congregation would ask him really good questions about the soundness of this proposed bank. They want to know how it's going to be secured, which is important. They want to know its relationship to the former Confederacy, who is on the bank's administration, and importantly, they want to know if they can trust these white men who have come south to ask and plead for African Americans to place their money with them. And so it is such an interesting interaction, I think, because what it does, it foreshadows the misalignment I talk about throughout the book about what African Americans themselves in this period of Reconstruction wanted and what the bank's white administrators were expecting in terms of African Americans' economic behavior. Black Americans wanted a safe place to save money, but ultimately what they wanted was to buy land, to buy property, because land and property were tangible. They could see it, they could walk it, they could see what they owned, they could see their investment. The bank's white administrators wanted depositors to keep their money in the bank for a long period of time, which would make sense based on the way that the bank was kind of investing in government bonds and securities, for example. But the bank's white administrators did not understand that African Americans were not concerned with keeping their money in the bank for long enough for their deposits to earn interest. Instead, again, they wanted to save money to buy what they could see, touch, feel, which was property, which was land. And so this interaction, I think, foreshadows those types of dynamics really well.
Do you think it's that these white people didn't, and particularly because so many of these white people are racist, do you think it's that these white people didn't understand, or they didn't really care? They didn't have correct intents to begin with?
I mean, I think it was probably a little bit of all of those things. I think we were talking about a period of time when Banking itself was still incredibly unstable. I mean, the book and the bank really opens in 1865, but the Lincoln administration had been kind of innovating new banking infrastructures beginning in 1862, right? And so the Freedman's Bank was one of these first banks been under this new regulatory infrastructure. The second, though, is that the Freedman's Bank was established as a savings bank. It was not established as a commercial bank or even kind of an investment vehicle. It was a savings bank. It was supposed to operate with the least amount of risk possible. And so what happens slowly, though, is that as the bank's board of trustees starts to shift, as the bank's main office shifts from New York to Washington, D.C., as more politically cunning trustees are placed on the board, that's when what I call the benevolent foundations of the bank's ideas start to be chipped away at. And so, yes, I think part of this was racism on the part of the bank's white administrators. The other is that we are seeing this overlap between kind of racism and capitalist greed, where you have bankers that I talk about in the banks. I think it's the third chapter. Henry Cook, he was a very famous banker at this period of time. He joins the bank, and he sees African Americans' deposits just sitting there, and he decides to illegally invest them. I think he understood whose money he was gambling with. At the same time, I don't think that he cared too much. He was in it for the kind of game of investing and of making money. And so this is kind of the environment in which the bank is operating, and African Americans are at the whims of these very capricious bankers.
You write, this is Chapter 5, A Lending Bonanza, 1870 to 1872. After Congress ratified the bank's charter amendment, the Finance Committee was eager to begin its foray into lending. Between June 8 and July 14, the bank loaned $174,158.75 to borrowers, all white. There was no information circulated in newspapers or periodicals about the new lending policies. Instead, all the advertisements from the bank continued to focus on depositors, encouraging them to open accounts and save money. By the fall of 1870, the Finance Committee opened the lending floodgates. It wasn't a trickle, it was a tidal wave. Under Henry Cook's influence, the Finance Committee had begun to accept applications for loans from close affiliates of bank trustees. But neither Cook nor other Finance Committee members had created a formal application process, and without formality, there was lending chaos. Eaton, for example, readily accepted applications primarily for loans from white members of the Washington elite. Black elite would be an oxymoron. As black depositors continued to pour millions of dollars into their accounts, hoping their dreams of political and economic freedom would be fulfilled, the controlling members of the Freedmen's Bank began to steadily ignore the depositors' needs. Despite the trustees' shift to focusing on lending, freed people hoped that their investments would aid their ascendance into a new era of liberty. Joke is on you, E. And even that's so important because you talk about the aggressive advertising for the life of the Freedmen's Bank. You know, come black people, even though white people did deposit, but I mean, it was overwhelmingly black people. But come, black people, and they're advertising in black newspapers, come put your money in the bank, come put your money in the bank. And then all of this malfeasance and shenanigans. That's what I mean. Like, then as you said that word, we're deliberately ignoring. It's not that we don't know that, oh, your dreams, you're trying to get a house. Let's work towards that. See if we get, no, we don't even care. Like and the white cronyism and nepotism. Oh my goodness, Professor Hill Edwards. I think I say that all the time. This broadcast is about the system of white supremacy racism. The only other isms that I think get brought up here, nepotism and cronyism. Oh my goodness. If black people could get in positions, I work at the bank or whatever, I got this connection to the bank, and oh man, Leroy, you want a loan? Wink, wink. Hey, Devontae, you want a loan? Lakeisha, you want a loan? Pay it back. Don't even come and hook up all your friends, and they don't. Oh my, white people do this. Oh my God, white cronyism and white nepotism that I just read, even with Henry Cook, that seems to be at the heart of this here work, unless I didn't read it correctly. Did I read wrong?
No, absolutely. I mean, it is a story. It is a surprisingly tight network of historical actors. We're talking about Henry Cook, who was extending loans to someone that he had contracted to build a set of homes in Georgetown, or General O.O. Howard, who founded Howard University, received loans to help build the university. And the contractor who supplied the building material was also the first person to receive the first illegal loan, who was also the bank's actuary. And so we are talking about a fairly tight-knit group of historical actors here, which I think is both fascinating, but it gives you, I think, just a clear sense of the depth of corruption that we're talking about, especially among the bank's white administrators, and the ways that they strategically kept out African Americans. I mean, you mentioned a minute ago about the black elite. One of the reasons why the bank's main office moved from New York to Washington, D.C. was to tap into the city's growing numbers of elite African Americans, some of whom joined the bank's board in later years. They didn't really have as much power or influence until it was too late, but the bank's white administrators understood the influence that African Americans could have in encouraging members of their communities to deposit money in open accounts. But by and large, this is a story about white plunder and corruption at a time when African Americans were really, I say, yearning for the kind of promise of freedom and yearning to experience that in really concrete ways that I think understanding the history of this bank helps us to better appreciate.
I wanted to focus on one of the more important characters in this whole work, John Alvord. You had already mentioned he's, a white northerner, and he's kind of following around Union troops and interacting with black people during the Civil War, and, oh, okay, this is your life, this is what you need, blah, 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 and all of that. So he's one of the folks who helps get the bank rolling, even though he's not present, we'll say. So once it gets established and such, his mind is elsewhere. So you write in Chapter 5, in October 1870, as freed people's deposits cascaded out of the bank to various borrowers in Washington, the board demanded Alvord's full attention. They requested that he make the bank his priority. The board made a formal appeal requesting the president of the bank, J.W. Alvord, Esquire, to devote his whole time and energies to the bank work. Alvord had accepted the role 2 years earlier, knowing what the responsibilities as bank president required. Though he was not trained in the intricacies of banking and finance, he did witness the work of his two predecessors. He observed the challenges that they faced. Perhaps that rationale explained the trustees' support for his candidacy in 1868. But the mere fact that the board made an official request to Alvord 2 years after his appointment illuminates the seriousness with which some of the trustees took his absence and lack of attention. either because of his truancy or his blind faith in the intentions of the Cook-led Finance Committee, Alvord simply went along with the bank's change of priorities, lending, not helping black people get property. The bank now had a new mission: to lend money to the friends, colleagues, and business partners of the bank's trustees, in particular to the associates of the Finance Committee. Without his official disapproval, the message that Alvord was communicating was one of acceptance, even acquiescence, to this new mission. It is likely that a few of the less outspoken trustees were privately urging Alvord to establish his presence in Washington because they witnessed the outsized influence of the Finance Committee on the bank's affairs. And I'll pause there. That passage, when they were talking to the black congregation and saying that your northern white friends, there are not going to be any racist shenanigans here with your money. And I'm looking at these like, is John Alvord, judging him by his conduct, is he a northern white ally to black people?
I mean, he was at first, I think. But I also think he was naive, and he did not fully appreciate the responsibility of establishing and working at a bank. I start the book saying that Alvord may have had good intentions at first, but just because he worked for the abolitionist cause before the end of slavery did not mean that he was not racist, that he believed in equality, or that he was not above taking advantage of his position. Now, it's important to note John Alvord worked both for the Freedmen's Bank and for the Freedmen's Bureau as an assistant commissioner of schools. And so he had two incredibly important positions in these two institutions, the Freedmen's Bank and the Freedmen's Bureau, connected. They worked in parallel, but they were separate. And so he did not, and never did, dedicate his full attention to his bank responsibilities. And this is what happens in 1871, well, really in 1872 and 1873, when he's president of the Freedmen's Bank and the Board of Trustees, who began to be really critical of the bank's lending policies, started to take him to task for his irresponsibility with his tenure as president of the Freedmen's Bank.
Context of White Supremacy, outstanding scholarship in savings and trust, the rise and betrayal of the Freedmen's Bank. As I said, the nepotism, and even some of the things that I point out in terms of how the system of white supremacy racism operates right now, October 2025, in terms of white people, they're in charge. So if you are going to an institution, if you're going to get a bank account, you're going to get a driver's license, they're the ones who are in charge, so they can make the decision. Did you follow all the rules to get this bank account correctly, accurately, according to the law, or not? Same thing, driver's license, going down the line. So sometimes they follow the rules, sometimes they don't. See this sort of thing happen all the time, especially areas where you might have discretion about enforcement. Wow. So this is all chapter 5. She writes, not only did the Finance Committee members prioritize lending to people in their personal and professional networks, but Eaton and Huntington were approving loans to borrowers using stocks and bonds as collateral, not real estate. Per Congress's approval of the bank's restructuring, loans made by the bank had to be secured by real estate, not stocks or bonds. The Finance Committee quickly ignored this regulation. What's more, Eaton had begun to make loans without consulting the committee. Perhaps the committee members believed that because they had the final say in evaluating the individual borrowers themselves, based on their own personal and professional relationships with the prospective borrowers, probably other white people. They did not need to abide by Congress's stipulations for how borrowers would show their credit worthiness. Perhaps they believed that they could trust Eaton's vetting. The Finance Committee's speed with lending suggests that protecting freed people's money came second to their interest in using African Americans' deposits for their own ventures. Not only did Cook, Eaton, and Huntington, in collusion with the rest of the Finance Committee, disregard the lending rules for borrowers, but they also ignored an important stipulation in their charter amendment. It was an issue that a handful of senators introduced during the congressional debates about the bank's charter amendment in 1869, the possibility that bank trustees would use the bank's deposits for themselves. The fears of Senator Cameron of Pennsylvania were realized. Of all the loans the Finance Committee made, white borrowers accounted for 80% of the loan volume, while they were only 8% of the account holders. Of the bank's loan volume, almost 30% went to people involved in real estate, while approximately 24% went to people who owned or managed businesses. The borrowers and bank trustees were a tight network of people who comprised politicians, public servants, businessmen, and even Freedman's bank employees themselves. That is kind of staggering. Like, wow. Just all of it. And I love, same sort of detail that I loved about the half that's never been told, like to just get the raw data of the millions of dollars that black people invested at this time, the massive amount of money that they lost, which I think you said amounts to about $40 million if we did the inflation calculator, today's money, and then the massive disproportionality in terms of who got these loans and who are you taking and aggressively going out to all the black newspapers and come on, save, come on, and it just a lot. I mean, this is total white theft. You're not even following the rules that you all set up about how this is supposed to be carried out just to hook up your white cronyism, nepotism, with the racism mixed in because we're robbing black, like the total reverse Robin Hood. Like it is staggering the detail here, Professor Hill Edwards.
Thank you.
Wow, let me see. I'm gonna double check to make sure we didn't miss any folks with questions. I thought the ending where you point out at the beginning, the white board members, they discuss, hey, it'd probably be good if we got a black person on board. Put a needle in that. We'll get back to that. So they don't add anybody, and they come back around. And then finally when, we have stolen and looted, and now we got the financial crisis in 1873, and things might be getting bad. People asking questions and bank runs and all that. We should get Frederick Douglass. Yes, we'll put Frederick. Like this, like I didn't know any of the details of all of this. I thought that was you want to talk about racism? Things are about to go bad, so we want to blame this on somebody. Yes, Frederick Douglass, who, unless I misread, he didn't get any loans. He didn't get in time where he could hook up all his black friends and former slaves and get them free loans. Like they put Frederick Douglass in to blame. And man, let me see. I'll see if I can read one. There were so many just amazing portions of the text with Frederick. Like I said, it just, wow. Folks should go and read some of his biographies. He wrote so much. This is chapter 7, the bank's last president, 1974. I was elected to that position about the middle of March 1874, but hesitated about taking the office until about the 1st of April. Douglass revealed. His hesitation was well-founded. Smart dude. He recognized that his first step would be to figure out the real condition of the bank and its numerous branches. And he realized this was no easy task. As soon as he became president, he quickly noticed inconsistencies between the information he was receiving about the state of the bank's finances and what he observed in the books that might suggest that white people are lying to him, but I'm just guessing. Douglass inherited a bank in a downward spiral, and unfortunately, he was unprepared for the tumultuousness he found. Though he had established and run 2 major publications, he was neither a financier nor a banker. He even admitted that he knew little of bank finance. Why would they pick such a person to be? Anyway, despite this lack of formal financial knowledge, the trustees understood his background. I bet they did. Their actions suggest that they wanted an African-American man at the helm of the bank as they attempted to steer it through this unpredictable moment. Ultimately, the trustees had misaligned intentions regarding Douglass's candidacy. Men such as Langston and Purvis wanted him to usher in a new era for the bank and for the depositors. They wanted to put the depositors' needs at the forefront of the bank's mission. However, not all of the trustees proceeded with the same goals. The white trustees' decisions to move forward with Douglass as bank president ensured that African Americans would bear the brunt of public criticism of the bank's ultimate demise. The narrative would be that black administrators mishandled the bank and black depositors were unable to handle the economic responsibility of freedom. Are you serious?
Yeah.
It's difficult to even.
And Douglass was kind of left to figure this out, not understanding the full scope of the bank's finances when he became president in the spring of 1874.
I read that passage where he said he was ignorant about all of this until he became president. And even once you become president, white people are lying to you, and you can look with your own eyes and wait a minute, the books say, and then what? Like, oh my, and then I'm gonna be blamed for all of this. I didn't even get it. That's what I mean, Professor Hill Edwards, when deliberate racist, like this is not an accident, this is not a ho-hum. I can't even imagine like the callousness. We did all of this stealing from slaves, millions of dollars from slaves, and then the gig is up, we're about to be found out. Let's see, I know, we'll get another slave and blame him for it. Like what? What?
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass can't even read. All due respect, these are facts unless I have been misinformed about Frederick Douglass. You get an illiterate slave and say it's his fault?
Well, he could read.
Or at that point, yes,
right.
learned,
again,
right.
He wasn't a banker. And neither was Alvord. And so the real problem, especially in terms of how the bank was run, is that influential bank administrators and trustees not taking seriously their responsibilities to their black depositors for properly stewarding the bank. That was the major problem, not understanding the responsibility that they had towards African Americans, as expressed and articulated in the bank's charter, to operate the bank with the least amount of risk to protect the economic investments of African Americans.
Much obliged. Certainly, Frederick Douglass wrote his autobiography and such, but I mean, that was a crime. Like, you could have been killed for that sort of thing back then. You're not supposed to have reading slaves. My goodness. And the repulsiveness of this continues. You just had to keep flipping pages. Like, are you serious? Like, so I just flipped the page from where I left off at. Blame all this on Frederick Douglass and uncouth black people. Douglass's enthusiasm as the president was short-lived. Within his first few weeks, Stickney approached him with an unusual proposition. Speaking as the bank's actuary, Stickney stated that we must have $10,000 that day or the bank would have to close. While considering this proposal, Douglass, in a state of shock, pulled together as many trustees as he could on short notice to a meeting at the central office. He polled the bank's leadership on the next steps to avoiding insolvency and panic. Bank administrators seconded Stickney's claim that the bank needed $10,000 immediately. As the trustees in attendance admitted that they could not and would not loan the bank that amount of money, Alvord offered a solution. Oh my God, are you serious? This is our friend from the North who, offered a solution. He turned to Douglass and said, Mr. Douglass, you have $10,000 here that might be used for this purpose in United States bonds, and if we could have these for a few days, it would help us push through, and it will be right in a few days. Though Douglass was not a wealthy man, imagine that, he had been making a living from his myriad speaking engagements in addition to his years in newspaper publishing. The positions he held and the experience he gained helped him develop as a businessman and in some ways an entrepreneur. But the amount of money that Alvord, the trustees, the bank administrators were relying on Douglass to offer was staggering. In a room of predominantly white men who were titans of industry, business owners, and were directly involved in the political life of a nation, a black man born into slavery was being asked to financially rescue the bank. Douglass acquiesced. Like, I have zero criticism for Frederick Douglass. Like, I thought I should read a lot more about him after reading all this. I just thought the behavior of these white people, wow, like, racism doesn't even capture it. Like, you're going to blame it on him. And then while we're in the process of, oh, yeah, you got $10,000 that we can hold. Like, do what? Do what? Everybody here, you probably have $10,000, or you know someone white who, it's difficult to even process. Yeah. Professor Hill, and bravo for including all of this to put this in context. But I mean, that's what I don't even know what to call this beyond racism. Am I making sense?
No, I mean, I think it was racism. Again, I think the idea of financial and economic violence is also very applicable here. And the fact that, again, we're talking about such a vulnerable population in the U.S., African Americans who were, again, recently emancipated from slavery. They put their trust, they put their money, they put their financial futures in the hands of bank administrators, and many of them were left empty-handed.
In the process of being left empty-handed, you point out that in the final days of the bank, in addition to this willful, deliberate effort to, let's put a black person in charge so he can take the blame for all of it. And we're going to hit him up, see if we can I mean, unless I read incorrectly, they did pay him the money back, but that, to me, that's totally irrelevant. Like, just what? Like, what?
Sure.
At any, I guess beyond that one, you point out in great detail that in the final days of the bank, there's such a deliberate effort to continue, I don't know, correct term, fleece black people because they know that the bank is going under. That's why we put Frederick Douglass in charge. But they continue with the advertisements in the black newspapers, like, give us your money, come on, give us your money, give us your money, save, keep it in the bank too, save, save, save. And conversely, the cronyism and nepotism, they're continuing to fleece and give money, loans, if wink, wink, to their white friends and homies in the last days of the bank. That's, I mean, just, man, like, I don't even.
The level of plunder, I think, is really astounding. And in many ways, it's shocking, too. I mean, kind of reading those sources and recognizing that after Congress mandated that the bank close, that the Finance Committee still continued to lend money. It's mind-blowing.
She said even after it closed, and she even used that C word again, chaos. They had all this confusion, and so you got white board members, oh, we'll take advantage, and we got other friends. Oh, you want $10,000? Boop, here you go. You want $5,000? Boop, here you go. Like, are you serious? Like, and additionally, she included, I thought Frederick Douglass, he had so many, as I said, just amazing passages. So they have hearings eventually to kind of detail how did all of this happen, who is to blame. It's got to be Frederick Douglass. But we get to these hearings. Frederick Douglass is elated to go testify because he wants to clear his name. It broke my heart. They have black press criticizing Frederick Douglass. Like, are you serious? Are you serious? He's eager to go. Did you have something you wanted to add there? Sorry about that.
Oh, no. The black press, of course, comes down pretty hard on Douglass in the immediate aftermath of the bank's closure because they were wondering how he could have been implicated in this scheme, and rightfully so. He has to really atone for the fact that he was the bank's president when it failed and when it collapsed. And he would spend much of the rest of his life really kind of talking about that and trying to come to terms with that as well.
Even, it seems, trying to figure out exactly how he had been duped in all of this, which, man, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Frederick Douglass. Just, wow, reading this book made me want to learn more. But and to that end, you write, this is in chapter 8, Fallout, 1874 to 1911. Douglass revealed that when he assumed the position of president, he realized there were a myriad of problems with the bank. Stickney sent him reports in which he provided updates he was receiving from various bank agents throughout the country. To obscure the correspondences, Stickney and the agents wrote in code, usually in cipher. As Douglass remembered, he believed that the shadowy nature of the correspondences meant that there were aspects of the bank's business about which Stickney did not want him to know. He's the president. Douglass was frustrated. He stated that the obscurity of the bank's accounting increased my suspicion of the unsoundness of things about the bank. Again, that's a smart dude. Douglass told the committee he learned that between 1867 and 1872, Cook and Huntington had been concealing their communications about the bank and about their business dealings by writing in code. They deployed this strategy in their business correspondence with Cook's brother, Jay, during the 1860s. by coding their communications and decoding their letters using a key, Cook and Huntington shrouded their borrowing from the Freedman's Bank from prying eyes, even from the gaze of fellow Finance Committee members. They carried this strategy into the communications about the Freedman's Bank and their borrowing habits from the bank. This meant that years of the bank's financial information were obscured so that only the people with the key could decipher the letters. Douglass believed that there was an asymmetry of information, and that he, as president, was not fully apprised of all the information he needed to properly lead the bank. He believed that he was set up to fail. Oh, that is spectacular writing, Professor Hill Edwards. I mean, wow. And then the subject, not just writing frivolous, just Jesus, man, like, and it's
I really wanted to play up the drama. One of the aspects of the story of the bank was how not just heartbreaking the story was, but it is kind of a thriller. I think it's a dramatic story, and so finding ways to really exploit those moments of drama, I think, helps the readers, or I hope helps the readers understand the depth of this tragedy for this travesty for African Americans, especially towards the end of the book when the bank is really failing and collapsing.
All of these enslaved black people robbed, stolen from, just trying to get their little piece of property, do some farming, get their bootstraps, if you will. That passage, for me, I'm someone who points out all the time. I hear it said that black people are experts about racism, that we know more about racism than white people because we experience racism, and white people don't know the pain of racism and all that. And I have said vehemently for years that is a dangerous lie. The experts on racism are white people. It is that same asymmetry of information that Frederick Douglass talked about today, or that he talked about 2 centuries past. It exists today. And I could even just with finances, I mean, he said they were writing in code. Like, what? They're writing in hieroglyphics to steal from black slaves, and then they're going to blame it on me as the president. Like, what? And even the black press, who they paid to advertise, even they're like, wow, you said it took him the rest of his life. It seems he's trying to figure all this out and having to talk about this and feeling regret about this. That's what I mean about and this is Frederick Douglass saying, I was ignorant. I did not understand at all. That remains the case. Even, in fact, I can fast forward. We had Carl Andrew as a guest on the program, and he wrote "The Land Was Ours." He was talking about how white people stole waterfront. Scholar. He has a UVA connection too. That's anyway. He talked about how his future research was going to be on racism and taxes. And he said, now, he's a white man. He said, man, you go to some of these places like Mississippi and such, they have 2 different record books for the tax assessment on white people, tax assessment on black people. He said, the thing is, though, you might have difficulty accessing it, and I'm white. Now, he was talking about practices that were like 20th century. That's a white man. That's why I said, like, the people who are experts on racism, all of those white people on the Finance Committee, Henry Cook, John Alvarad, those are the experts on tell us how you fleeced all the black, because Frederick Douglass doesn't know. He's still trying to tell us what is this code that y'all got here? Frederick Douglass doesn't know. white people, they are the experts. Am I making sense here, even in context with Frederick Douglass?
Sure, and I mean, especially in terms of those communications, I think it was clear to Douglass. It was clear fairly early on in his tenure, within days, if not a week or two, that he was in a horrible position, that the black depositors were in a horrible position, and there was really nothing that he could do, and so he was stuck. His reputation was at stake, his own finances were at stake, and he was essentially at the whims of the bank's white administrators, who were fine with stealing African Americans' money and doing so unabashedly. And so he is coming to terms with, on the one hand, the success of the bank, because at the end, by 1874, African Americans had put about $57 million collectively in the bank, in their bank accounts. And a conservative estimate today would be, and this is conservative, about $1.5 billion. It could be double that by some economists' estimations. But on the one hand, he's seeing the economic power of Black Americans. On the other, he's witnessing the fact that, again, this is towards the end of Reconstruction, he's seeing the federal government and federal authorities retreat from many of the promises that they were making in the immediate end of the war in terms of political rights, citizenship rights, voting rights. And I think he's also seeing the history, the brief kind of tenure of the Freedman's Bank as a reflection of both that promise, but that failure as well.
Promise and the failure. Absolutely. Absolutely. That I'm going to remember that one. Asymmetry of information. And in fact, that dynamic, it reminded me, this book's so important for so many reasons, that same context, the financial downturn in 2008 and the subprime loan crisis, where once again, Black people, non-white people deliberately set up to fail financially. In the midst of all of that, when do we get our first Black president? Right in the midst of that financial downturn. This seems like there's a parallel. Yep, it seems very common that Black people are put in charge, and I'm putting that in my air quotes, but they're put in charge where you are set up to fail. That white people know more than you do that, we're about to be indicted for embezzling $15 million. And since you're president, they're going to think you did. Good job. Congratulations. Our first Black president, Leroy. Right. You're going to have fun for about 15 minutes. I think that indictment, like that sort of thing is, it seems like I didn't know about all this, but that is even staggering to me, that this might be something that's been in the racist playbook for 200 years. Do all the stealing and crimes that you're going to do. And then when it looks like the gig is up, put a Black person in charge and they'll take the blame for everything. Like, what? Y'all did this to Frederick Douglass too? What? Come on. We had one person who dialed in with a hand. I guess just even the repetitive, when the criticism, because some of these hearings, unless I misread, they were carried out. People would have to remember, for this time period in the 19th century, the Republican Party would be the party of Lincoln, and these are the so-called allies of Black people. The Democrats would be the racists like Ben Tillman. It didn't flip-flop until about 100 years later, so you'd have to keep that in mind. So like the racist Democrats come and have hearings to say, hey, you got these old carpetbagger Republicans, and they came with this old wacky scam idea for a bank, and you Negroes are stupid enough to go along with these fool carpetbaggers to do this old dumb thing, and it serves you right for losing all your money. Even that sounded kind of familiar, like you got these old you just have to flip it. You got these old wacky radical leftists, and you dumb black people just go along with everything that they say and talk about you want to defund the police or anything else, and it serves you right for going along with their. It sounds very similar. Did I misread?
Yeah, I mean, it is not too dissimilar. I mean, once the bank collapses, it closes in 1874, there are a series of congressional inquiries. The first is an immediate debrief that happens in December of 1874. The next one happens in 1876, and that is led by a Virginia Democrat, a former captain with the Confederacy, and he would rise to be the kind of Grand Master of the Virginia KKK. His name is Beverly Douglass, and Beverly Douglass leads the second official investigation, but again, he's not doing so because he really wants to expose the bank's failure for the benefit of African Americans. He's doing so to win political points amongst his party and amongst voters. And even though he does so in an incredibly racist way, because he's calling to testify members of the bank's board of trustees and administration, there's all this information that comes out about the double dealing, the illegal loans, the runs on specific bank branches, how bank branch cashiers were trained or not trained. And so all of this information comes out in the aftermath. Now, interestingly enough, the final congressional inquiry is done in 1879 by one of the last black members of Congress in the 19th century. There wouldn't be another one until the mid-20th century, the last black senator. And this set of congressional inquiries by Blanche K. Bruce is really the last debrief. And so we have Cook testify, we have Alvord testify, and Bruce calls them to testify because he knows he's not going to be reelected, but he wants to get on record as much as possible a kind of history of the bank from beginning to end and its immediate aftermath.
Did they divulge the key to decipher the loan records in the hearings?
No, unfortunately not. But that's where a lot of this information about the key comes out. And interestingly enough, Henry Cook, he and his brother Jay Cook had been communicating in code for about a decade because they were, and not just in relationship to the Freedman's Bank, they were actually trying to shield financial and banking information from their competitors in Philadelphia, especially the Drexels. And so they kind of expanded this communication in code to their dealings with the Freedman's Bank.
The most familiar mystery. Wow. That is just... I was left speechless at many portions of your work, Professor Hill Edwards. Just, wow, spectacular scholarship through and through. Z's mommy, did you have a question for Professor Justene Hill Edwards, daughter of Deborah Bryan?
Yeah, greetings. My question was about John Alvord, and I was curious about his background in terms of his family and his wealth, and then his legacy, like his descendants, and if they speak about this, and what ways do they speak about it, and their levels of wealth, and if you knew anything about that, I'd be very interested. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for the question. So John Alvord begins the story. He and his family are living in New Jersey. Again, he's a minister. He's not making a lot of money. I have access to some of his private letters, which was exciting, and it's clear in his correspondences with his wife that they are struggling financially. He is apologizing to her about not providing a better home for her and their children. And that is one of the motivations that he has for not just opening the bank, but working for both the Freedmen's Bank and the Freedmen's Bureau. It's because he and his family need the money. Now, this is where it gets interesting. As the bank makes as the bank's main office makes the transition from New York to D.C. in 1867, he starts to make strategic investments in the businesses of some of the bank's wealthier board of trustees. And so 5 years later, by 1870, his family's wealth triples because of these strategic investments. And so, again, John Alvord is painted as kind of being this benevolent figure once the bank begins operations, but it's clear really 5 years into the bank's tenure that he is seeking to benefit financially from his work with the Freedmen's Bank. He is called to testify before the Bruce congressional testimonies, and by 1879 and 1880, he's old, he's infirm, and he says that he doesn't remember much from his time with the bank, and all he wants to do is go to Colorado and be with his family. And so he's kind of not much use in the later years in terms of getting information. But yeah, it is clear that his arc in this story is probably the most revealing one, because I think it shows just how kind of corrupt he had become and how willing he was to sacrifice the financial security of the tens of thousands of African Americans who put millions of dollars in their bank accounts in exchange for his own financial security.
Thank you. That's really, really, really fascinating. I've been interested in just how wealth has been produced by white people in America, and it seems to always come from very nefarious things that usually come from exploitation of Black people. So I thought that was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Indeed, I appreciated that one. Did I hear that correctly, Professor Hill Edwards? That you said John Alvord's his family's wealth tripled after they commenced with the white rascality and fleecing these Black slaves?
Yeah. I mean, his family's wealth, according to tax records, did increase by a notable amount. And so, yeah, it's these strategic investments that he made in businesses. I think he and Cook had conversations about how he might invest his money, and he saw a very clear return on those investments, and he would not have made the type of money that he made without his affiliation with the bank and the strategic investments that he made at the advising of the bank's wealthier trustees, white trustees.
That generally is the type of thing I would point to and say, wow, the economics of white supremacy racism, that white people make abusing and mistreating Black people profitable, like triple in a short time. And then you compare that, hey, look here, Fred, you think you can loan us $10,000? We're going to get you. Don't even worry about it. We got you. Like, are you serious? Woo! Just wow, stunning scholarship, savings and trust. I saw just a curious phrasing. This is not the most important. I just said, I have to ask her this when we talked to her. You later on, you're taught this in chapter 8. You write, moreover, Purvis had personal reasons for supporting Douglass's candidacy and for being so outspoken. Since the bank's failure in 1874, I've been called a pimp and a black leg by the Star and other papers, Purvis argued, we found that we were losing control among the colored people, and we had hopes to get it back again and control the bank as well. For that reason, the black trustees pushed strongly for Douglass's presidency, even though he would be duped too. What in this context, what is a black leg? Do you know?
You know, it's a good question. I am not exactly sure. I should know that. But I was more focused on the fact that he was acknowledging that he had been called a pimp. That was not something that I had expected to see. But I think in my mind, a black leg was kind of a reference to someone who was underhanded and untrustworthy. So.
Wow, they got all that crazy 19th century slang and such. That is kind of wild, too, him being called a pimp, I guess, and this is all just for his candidacy for Frederick Douglass, and saying he wants him involved in the bank to, make sure we can get black people back on board, and maybe advocate for them. That's why they're calling him a pimp and a black leg?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Dang. That is... Man, so much of this is just repulsive. Like, woo, the racism and... Okay, anyway, we typically try to make sure we ask our guests, this whole book seems so much about racism. Do you have a definition for the term racism, Professor Hill Edwards?
Oh, that's a great question. I would define it as the ways in which society is structured based on discriminating the discrimination of citizens of a different race. And so it has to do with this discrimination based on racial difference. And so that is what we're seeing in this period, and most certainly with the history of the bank.
Okay. I'm just trying to paraphrase, get that down. If I got your definition correct, ways society is structured based on discrimination of citizens of different races, racial differences. If I kind of got an accurate paraphrase, it would be possible for a non-white person to practice racism against a white person, according to that definition? Would that be possible?
Well, it depends on who has power, and I think power, governmental power, military power is incredibly important to distinguishing the kind of the flow of discrimination. And so theoretically, yes, but I think practically, no.
Theoretically, yes. Practically, no. Right on. I guess I didn't see any other questions from listeners. They had better get a copy, Savings and Trust, The Rise and Betrayal of the Freedman's Bank. Just extraordinary information in the text through and through. Make sure I didn't miss any of the folks there. Okay, got everybody. Who do you think is more informed about the actual mechanics, like day-to-day operations of racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works? Do you think people classified as white are more informed? Do you think non-white people are more informed about what racism is, how it works?
I would say people of color, especially in the U.S., because it is a daily experience. I think we live in a society where it structures so much of everyday life. So, but that is actually a great question. I had not thought about it in that way.
I'm with Brother Frederick Douglass. I am still learning and very ignorant about racism myself. So, hey, Mo from Dallas tricked us. Mo from Dallas, did you have a question for Professor Hill Edwards?
Greetings, Gus. Yes, I do. Thank you for the program. Greetings to listeners and callers. My question was, during your research for this writing, did you run across any white people that were disturbed or surprised about the information that you discovered?
Do you mean that I spoke to or that I found in the historical record?
Oh, that you spoke to personally, like in this day and age.
Oh, yes, all the time. I think one of the fascinating parts about this process has been most people, even historians that I talk to, are surprised by just the depth of this story. The fact that they don't know about it, that it should be taught more. The fact that it's so relevant to how we talk about the racial wealth gap, for example, today. And the fact that it is kind of a snapshot of a lot of what we see continue to structure American society today. And so, yeah, I mean, I have been talking about the book for a while now, and I'm constantly talking to people who are surprised about this history and that it's kind of front and center, but they know nothing about it.
Well, the ones that you have talked to and have learned about it, do you know if they've dedicated any actions towards maybe making some sort of recompense for the situation?
Oh, that's a great question. I have talked to people about practically what that would look like. And, of course, it has been kind of wrapped up in larger debates about reparations. But I've not come across anyone who personally wants to kind of give a financial donation in that respect, because I think, and perhaps I do agree, this has to be kind of a larger institutional step. I find it hard to kind of think about how a one-on-one type of interaction might remedy these larger problems that have to do with society writ large.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, no one has decided to, like, no person that you've spoken to has decided to commit their time to doing it. Maybe not finances, but just their time to trying, though? If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think especially for me and kind of talking about this book, educating.
Beyond talking.
Oh, beyond talking? No, not really. And I think it's because, wonder if it's because kind of institutional change at this level with this type of topic issue, I think is really tough, and there has to be the political will. And I'm not sure, especially in this moment, if that's the case.
Well, thank you. That's all my questions. I'll get my life.
Thank you for the question.
As we learned from John Alvord, practicing white supremacy racism is profitable. Go from having to apologize to your wife and I'm going to do better, and threefold increase. Hey, we are doing all right. Do a little shopping and hit Amazon up, get that wish list. Like, woo, man, that right there will erode your will to replace white supremacy with justice. Just any hoodles. I appreciate so much you saying the name, because I was looking for B as in boy, period, B as in boy, period, Douglass, for the Senate hearings, and it's Beverly Douglass, because I was thinking, like, ooh, who is this dude? And like, oh my God. Like, I thought. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, there are two Douglasses here.
Yes, we got Brother Fred and then Beverly Douglass. And then you shared in your response earlier about him being in the Klan and Virginia and all that. Like, oh my God, like, I have to go into do they have any like biographies or books about Beverly Douglass specifically, or is he just kind of, in a few footnotes here and there?
Oh, I'm actually not sure if there is a definitive biography of him. That is a great next project for another historian.
Absolutely. Whoever's out there, get on that. We would like to learn more about Beverly Douglass and his racist shenanigans in VA. Anywho, we have been talking about easily one of the best books I have read. Oh, we're in October, so that's, yeah, most of the year. Easily one of the best books I have read this year. Easily, maybe all time. Savings and Trust, The Rise and Betrayal of the Freedman's Bank. Super important, especially any folks start talking about economics and black people, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And wow. Even just to read and learn about Frederick Douglass and how humble he was in learning about the system of racism. And wow, I did not know as much as I thought. Like, wow, that me too, Brother Fred, me too, still learning. Thank you so much in that effort. Thank you so much for writing a spectacular and super informative book. I am so glad I took the time to read it, and extra nice to have the author come and tolerate our questions and foolishness for a little bit this Wednesday evening. Please keep up the rest of your outstanding scholarship. We will be excitedly waiting for your next project, and I'm going to stick to my word. I'm going to go back and check the footage from the melee on the football field and see if I see anybody who looks like, just to make sure you were not out there cutting a fool.
Oh, no. Well, you will not see me there, but I appreciate you having me on the program, and thank you so much for your questions and your listeners' questions.
For sure. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Again, we've been chatting it up. Justene Hill Edwards, thank you so much for your time and insight. We will chat again soon. Evening.
Have a great night. Thank you so much.
You too. Context of White Supremacy. Reading more important than watching television. It is so wacky. Again, I found out about this book from Calvin Schermerhorn. He visited with us this spring, and I didn't even want to read that book. I just wanted to talk about, because he wrote an article that was about the wildfires in California and their impact on black people, which is important. That was, but man, that book was so important, and that's how we got to the book for today, which, they had a racist code so we can hide how we have been fleecing the Negras. And this is built on our code that we've been using probably for our financial shenanigans. She said at minimum, we're trying to hide secrets and such from our competitors and all that, but we just continue with our code and use it to hide information from the Negras. Wow. Wow. And Frederick Douglass looking at it like, what? They got, what is this here? It can't be good because we ain't got no money. So, like, whoa. This book is amazing. Even, in fact, there is a circle of pitifulness in the text. I should have asked her about that. What do you mean, Gus, a circle of pitifulness? This book starts. John Alvord, he has that wacky name, still suspected racist, Alvord. He's tagging along with Union troops during the Civil War and talking to black people and, oh, what's your experience, blah, 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 and slaves and all that, blah, blah. Okay. This dude, and he's seeing that why do we need a Freedman's Bank? Oh, okay. Black people, they don't have banking access. White people won't let them use their banks. So what are they doing? They're giving their money to a kindly white soldier, giving it to their white friend. Hold my dollar. And some of these black soldiers, they were earning money during, the Civil War. So, I mean, they are accumulating a substantial, and even some of the, that she said, Professor Hill Edwards, she said her first book, even some of the black slaves, they were apprenticed and such, and so they were allowed to earn money as well. They could go out and garden, fish on their spare time, do things to earn money. So you had a number, and even buy their own freedom. But some of them, they couldn't use the white banks. So this is what they're resorting to, or some of them, they're like digging up holes and hiding in the ground and all this stuff. And says, oh, okay, we need to get a bank for, niggers. That way they can invest or at least save their money. It'll be safe and all the rest of it. We get to the end of the book. They've been robbed, looted, lost, all this money. And now they are distrustful of the banks. So they go back to hiding it in the ground, under the mattress. It even said some of them giving it to a kindly white person to hold on to. Man. Like, man. It is amazing. It reminded me the half has never been told. Like, it's staggering in the detail, and it's so meticulous, right? This is like a financial book, but it's about racism. This is the same thing. It's a financial book, so it's got lots of figures and facts, and it's so meticulous with the detail, footnotes and everything, but it is staggering. Just like I said, the layers. And then, like I said, you get to the end of all this, and it's still, you know why this happened. You lazy, good-for-nothing niggers out there wasting all your money shooting dice, drinking Mad Dog 2020. We got robbed. Like, what? White people robbed us. And you robbed us and blamed it on Frederick Douglass. Whew. Dr. Welsing used to say, A+. You talk about different ways when white people practice racism, and they do so in a devastating manner. The Freedman's Bank, A+. You loot all these millions from black people right after the Civil War, and then get to the end and blame it on Frederick, another slave. Whew. What does it mean to be white? Staggering book. Staggering. Anyway, we'll take a quick commercial, and then we will be right back. See if folks have any thoughts. Anybody read this one? It's been out a little while, so they could have read this one. And then we will updates, be back tomorrow, neutralizing workplace racism, all that good stuff. Anywho, Context of White Supremacy. We shall be right back. Let's see.
And from the late 1960s, after the death of Martin Luther King and the riots and the upheavals and all like this, and black people with their fists in the air and all like that, and trying to stumble and fumble and find their way and get focus, the white supremacists made a blueprint and put it into action. And that is, I'm going to have these people so confused, they don't even know what they started out to do. And by the late 1970s, they had just about completed it. And we've been on that ever since. And you mentioned something very important. They are more comfortable than ever. But see, it's like making gorillas comfortable in a cage, or monkeys, or pandas. You still got them in a cage, but they're comfortable. See, so give him some bling bling. It's like giving an animal a brand new car and training the animal to ride up and down the street in it. And then you stand back and point at the animal. Like one white man said in the late 1950s. He said he doesn't care what kind of car a Negro has. He said he's still a nigger. And when he rides by in a shiny car, to him, it's just a monkey in a car. White people built a car, put a monkey in it, trained the monkey to drive the car, so now you're looking at a monkey in a car. See, but black people don't see themselves that way. But this is how the white supremacists see us, and they are the ones who run our business. And we have to know that when they look at us, that's what they see. That's what they see. That's what they see. And at a subliminal level, what they see begins to spill over into our brains so that we at a subliminal level see each other that way and indirectly see ourselves that way.
Context of White Supremacy. We'll be here Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, neutralizing workplace racism. And then Friday, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Last installment, The Sins of the Mother. We'll wrap it all up. The trial, Susan Smith, all that good stuff. Learned a lot with that as well, because I didn't know the details about that case, but that's Friday. And then the compensatory call-in on Saturday. We'll catch up on news information from this past week. That's it. I will share quickly. I didn't see. Wow, time has been. Or I guess it's not. I got confused about the time even. I'll share quickly. I was at my favorite co-op over the week, or just at the beginning of the week. And like I said, it's been a terrible year. They had the shutdown, right? How that's impacted black people, federal employees, and all that, non-white people, and everything else within the system of white supremacy. But I went to the co-op Monday, or beginning of the week, might not have been. I think it was Monday though. Went to the co-op, and whole terrible day. I'm hoping to at least just get my little dinner victuals and go back, hide inside, eat my little victuals, get ready for the program today, what have you. Man, I get in the store. I've literally been in there like 30 seconds. I glance over in like the soap section, and there is a large canine with a dude. Now he's kind of hunched over, so I'm thinking this is a white person, but they're hunched over. I can't really see him, and someone else. So I'm moving away from them just because I wasn't going to that area of the store at the time. So I'm going to like the center of the store. I turn right, and the hound, and you have to forgive me, I'm vegan and I'm not a pet person, so I've never had a dog as a pet or friend, so I don't know the different breeds and such. But this is like a larger beast, like I'm going to say 100 pounds, look like. So I look, and the dude and the beast has dropped a large flaming pile of feces in the middle of the grocery store, right at the produce section, at the avocados no less. I am repulsed. And also, I think I'd said, I'm here. It's been a terrible day on the plantation, me and Frederick Douglass both, and I'm going to see if I can get my dinner victuals. And now for people who own dogs, maybe that's, whatever, or people who own children, like, hey, you have to clean up worse than that, and dogs, you love them, but they make mess. Why is the dog in the store? It's not a service animal, like WTH. Like, I'm totally repulsed. Like I said, I didn't want to go and let me love one, lick him. I never think that way about hounds. Just, ugh. Romulus Remus. We read the ISIS papers, yes. Anyway, so I take a moment, mental health, get myself together. Do you want to leave? Like, this has been crazy. Like, it had been the whole day had just been like that. So it's just like, what in the world? So I walk back to the front, and the store clerks are there, and I don't see the dude, dog, they're all gone. And so security comes around. I shop here off. I'm a member. So security comes around. He speaks, hey, Gus, what it do? Blah, blah, blah. And he says, man, I'm so stressed. Like, oh, my skull is pounding. I said, what's wrong? He said, but that dude and his heifer, the dog, they have been banned from the store already. So now I'm like beyond repulsed. Like, are you serious? They're not even supposed to be here? Like, what? He says, they know they're not supposed to be here. I've talked to them. We've been through all this before. They've been in here stealing from the store. And I mean, just how do you get back in the dog and you? Oh, my skull is throbbing. My skull is throbbing, black brother. I'm like, what? Now I'm almost like, me too. My skull, I cannot believe this. Like, what? Different store employee, also non-white. She chimes in. She's been listening. I guess he was kind of talking to all of us, although he came up to greet me, so he's talking to all of us, kind of. So she chimes in, and she says, the fella of the group, it's a duo, the dude who is holding the dog, he is Filipino, she said, non-white. And the security guard, he had shared that the male, he said, he tends to be courteous. He's respectful. Generally, security doesn't have a problem with him. He said it's the female. I guess she does the looting, what we've been talking about today, and then all the rest of it, even though the male had the dog who defecated next to the avocados. And so the female clerk, non-white, she says he's Filipino. That's why he has good parents. That's why he knows how to behave. But he loves being around white people. He loves the white girls. So that's what he has in his life. That did not improve my day at all. It did not remove the load of feces from the produce area. It just provided context about this incident. And in fact, it immediately reminded me of Puget Sound's own Vili Falau. Suna Falau seemed like a pretty good parent. Much better than Mary Kay Letourneau. Doing the best she can. If she didn't have white teachers, white racist teachers sabotaging her efforts, things could have turned out a lot better for her. But that's who it reminded me of, was Vili Falau. Like, oh man, those white women can be the destruction of everything. Or have you with Holden literally leave you holding the bag of dog poo. See? Anyway, I guess that's not my best Seattle story, but that did happen, and I did not contribute anything. I did not say anything about racism. As I said, I thought they were both white, but I was corrected. Non-white male, white female, tragic arrangement in many ways. Let's see. The broadcast today, we'll see if folks have any thoughts, observations, read the book, maybe. Phenomenal. Again, this is why I say we cannot read fiction. Now I can pull two illustrations. Elephants in the Sky. That's a pretty recent fiction book about racism, no less. Imagining a world where all the white people vanish. How fun. How interesting. Even, I mentioned the wildfires in California beginning of this year. They got Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower. Hey, she talked about all that in a novel, fictional account. Even deals with a little bit of racism against black people. But it's fiction. That's all well and good, but if we're ignorant about the Freedmen's Bank, ignorant, like what? They put a whole code together to loot black people and then blame it on Frederick Douglass? Put a plaque up with 2 sentences that don't tell you none of that? No. We're going to have to go, really, replace white supremacy with justice. Then we can read Harry Potter and Iceberg Slim. To me, that makes logical sense. If we were way informed, way intelligent, that would be different. That's not the case. We just watch a lot of YouTube and Netflix. We are not informed. Brother Frederick Douglass say, I was ignorant. They were speaking in hieroglyphics about how they robbing the niggers. I didn't even know what they were saying. It's like they were speaking in tongues. What? And then imagine you come in there, Brother Fred come in there. Excuse me, Mr. Cook, Brother Alvrode, y'all got these funny, what does this mean here? Oh, don't worry about that, Fred. That don't even concern you. I know, but see, I'm supposed to be the president. They say I'm in charge, people are asking me questions and blaming me, and, I'm trying to, so I get an understanding of things, so I can make sense. You think you can tell me? Oh, no, don't even worry about it. That's what? They gonna blame me. Y'all done stole and hooked up all of your white friends and given them, all these thousands. That's not even adjusted for the inflation rate, but you done given them all this money, giving them all of the niggers' money, slaves' money. And then you're going to find it. Where is, we got a slave? Hey, really? That's the Susan Smith. That's the book we wrapping up on Friday. I hadn't thought of it, but I mean, for real. And this South Carolina, too. That's the Susan Smith playbook. We do all the stealing. We do all the robbing. We do all the killing. We do all the raping. And then we get to the end of it. That's white people. We do all that. And then we get to the end of it and say, Leroy did it. Frederick Douglass did it. Gus T did it. Did he? He did it. Yep, that's it. Obama, he did it. It's his fault. Yep, that's right. What? How is it? What? They had the black press. It is Brother Fred's fault. It had such Nurse Rivers overtones for people who haven't been listening to the Cows or Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where white people for decades experiment on privileged black males in Alabama, and the only name we know decades after this happens, Negro female nurse in Alabama. It's her fault. You're in charge. You should have known. What? Wait, nurse, what? I'm not even a doctor. Nurses don't even mess with me. Come on. Is Frederick Douglass a slave? I said he can't even read. He done stole and learned and risked his life to learn how to read against the law. And that's who you going to put as president of the bank when you know all this is about to be found out. Somebody might even go to jail for fraud. They could have put that on Fred too. Fred, you're going to jail for fraud. I'm done. Star 61 if you have thoughts about this book. Is amazing. And in fact, if you live like Virginia, South Carolina, Tennessee, places where they had a lot of Negro slaves, check and see, did they have one of these banks in your area? Because they might have a monument. Like I read, too, they might have a plaque. If you in one of these places, you go. I talk about that all the time. Local history. If you have children, or it could be an individual project, go check it out. Where was this bank? You could get this book and see how much money did black people in this area who might be our relatives, how much money did they lose on the bank, the Freedman's Bank, if it was in this area? That could be, I can't even say a fun project, but I mean, hey, that's money you could have inherited. That's money that they could have used and bought property that you inherited. Anything, invested, and got wealthy stock options or something. They could have invested that money, passed it along. Somebody invested in Yahoo. You could have been a millionaire. So I can't say fun, but certainly it might be something that would be interesting, that would, keep you willing to go and do some studying, some digging, see what you could find if there was one of these banks in your area, and you got family, black people that lived there for, a while, for some generations. Yeah, check and see. Anyway, let's see. Mo in Dallas, we'll see if other folks, if they have any thoughts, observations from what they heard our discussion. Professor Hill Edwards, any thoughts? Mo in Dallas. Might be just listening. That's fine too. Grant, see if other folks give a quick check, see if they have any thoughts from the broadcast with Professor Justene Hill Edwards. Again, I would say read the book. Maybe even check some of the footnotes for the different sources where Frederick Douglass talks about his experience with the bank. Man, like he had such just amazing insight. He was so humble about everything, but he had such amazing insight about his time at the bank, and really the racism of it, and what I say, all the minimize, obfuscate, and obscure. And he had that word throughout. They would do things to obscure all the ways that they had robbed these Negro slaves, who depositing their hard-earned funds at the bank and thinking it's going to be safe, and wow, this will be better than asking some white man to keep it in their pocket, or burying it out by the creek, and then I forget where it is, or whatever the case may be, or a raccoon comes and digs it up, or whatever, or a white man comes and robs me, or whatever, and then you still get robbed by white people, and they blame it on Frederick Douglass. That's, if anything, man, the white cronyism and white nepotism, that's staggering too, because there's so much of that throughout this book. But if anything, this would be another illustration when Fuller says the people who are most to blame are classified as white. He said that all the time, for years, all the time. That is so important. And for situations just like this, it might be, maybe, Frederick Douglass, maybe he did something incorrect in all of this. He shouldn't have done this, or I don't know. I generally do not fault black people for saying they should have known better. I generally don't take that position, because I've concluded, like Frederick Douglass said, I didn't even know, man. I was ignorant. I'm not even supposed to know how to read. So I generally don't blame black people for being ignorant about racism, because I'm ignorant about racism. So I don't even know what he would be culpable for. Like, say, well, you allowed white people to use you? Like, what? They were writing in code. He didn't even know, they were actively seeking to deceive him about what was happening here. They were the one, in fact, they didn't even have to allow him to be a part of all of this. They could have said no, kept it the way they had it before. This is just for white people. We don't allow niggers. They only even allowed him when it was, somebody about to get blamed for this. Come on down, Fred. Come on. Be front center. Front center. Yeah, right there. You'll be president. Yep, you in charge. You the man. They don't even talk like that normally, unless it's, ooh-wee. The police, they're coming today. Oh, yeah. Yep, you the man, Fred. You the man. I got to go, though. Got to run. Yeah. That type of thing. Be careful if you're going to be in charge. But, again, remember the people who are most to blame. Don't be the one out there. I'm leading the charge, and that no-count Frederick Douglass, and boy, what a coon, and he done took all our money, and he should have, because there's no way I could take that. He should have known better, and Whitey is going to, what? He should have known that, like, what? And by the time he got there, the damage had already been done. I'm just trying to get here to find. I'm like y'all. One, I do have money in the bank, and they done hit me up for $10,000, and I don't even know what's happened. Like, yeah, I can't even say. Like, what do you mean I should have known? I'm trying to figure out, and they are actively deceiving me. They got hieroglyphics in the bank. Like, what's going on? They have a racist code. We don't have a counter-racist code. It's real raggedy, and for sure, not name-calling and blaming other victims of racism. That is not a part of our counter-racist code. Sadly, it would probably be the exact same response today. We would sit around, Frederick Douglass, you no count, you coon, and you done took all our money. Wait a minute, Frederick. I thought he couldn't even read. But wait a minute. Anyway, spectacular read. I cannot say enough. I would definitely say this is one you should get on your shelf. I'm not sure if you have like younger children. When I say younger, like 12, 13, 14, maybe not quite on their reading level, but I would say by senior in high school, oh, yeah. If you got somebody, like if they had been sitting around 17 for this past summer, Netflix all day long and playing on their phone all day long, oh, yeah, they could read this book. I think at 17, 18, maybe they're sitting around all summer and then they're going to do college or what have you coming up in the fall. Oh, yeah, they can read that for sure. It's not super long. It's not something you have to take like a month to read the whole thing. It does have footnotes, but you don't have to read them. I do encourage checking the footnotes, but you don't have to. You can still make excellent sense of the text and you'll grasp what's being discussed. She said it was intended for her students and general audience, lay people as they call it. So young people, older people, this is when they have an audio book. You can read it together in the vehicle to and fro. It's like I said, it's not even that long. Read, discuss, study, share, pay particular attention. Frederick Douglass saying, man, I was ignorant. Man, I didn't have no idea. Man, they had a code. Make sure I didn't grasp all their financial malfeasance, looting black people, white people having a code to loot black people, white people having a code to loot black people. What does it mean to be white? Anywho, let me double check. Let's see. Did any of the folks have commentary? I know Mo and Dallas, any other folks, anything they wanted to share before we wrap things up for today? Assume they are just listening. Grand. Much obliged for the folks listening in. Invest, hit the blog, Racism racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com, listener-supported counter-racist radio. You'll see the PayPal button top right corner. Beneath the button, you'll see the links for PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who have kept us broadcasting for 16 plus years. Hopefully constructive more often than not. We also have our wish list. It is linked on the blog right beneath the PayPal button. It is listed on Amazon under Gus T. Renegade. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who have nabbed an item or 6 over the years. Hopefully we have been worthy of your time and energy. That said, sobriety would be best under conditions of white terrorism. You got all these racist shenanigans and white schemes all the time. It is best to be alert so that you can ask lots of questions. Be real vigilant about, what people are saying, what people are offering, how people are behaving around you, because, hey, system of white supremacy racism, deception is rampant, as is the racism and the cronyism and the nepotism. Creator, we ask that you remind us to stop saying not all white people are racist. I think that might have been a part of the banking problem. John Alvord, see, white allies. He's one of the good northern white people. Remind us, stop wasting non-white people's time and energy. Remind us to maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Remind us to stop name-calling people classified as black. Even Frederick Douglass. Stop producing throwaway offspring to be raped by Mary Kay Letourneau or drowned by Susan Smith. Other white women. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.